Twerk. Let's see.
Awesome. Yeah, I hear you. I just don't. You just got to hit the.
There we go.
Screen. All right, cool. Much better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start that point over, and then we'll just keep. It's been on record. Awesome.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, if my close friends know that I have an alcohol problem or a drug problem or fill in the blank, and if they care about me enough, they're going to have the conversation with me and call me on it. They're going to say, Johnny, why are you risking your health? Why are you risking your well-being with this kind of pointless habit? Seek help, right? Like reach out to professionals, help yourself live well. And that's alcohol and any substance, and it's a drug. But I can't say that if you're overweight and obese. We don't even have that conversation. So I could alcohol shame, I could drug shame, I could cigarette shame, but you can't fat shame. And I'm not saying to go out there and make fun of people, but I'm saying that the conversation, I feel as a health and wellness professional, should be started at least from the top. Not one politician I heard since my adult life even mentioned exercise or even mentioned the issue America has with obesity and sedentary lifestyles. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, well, there's so many things to unwrap here. One, the number of people who have died in the United States from COVID. No one ever mentions the obesity factor. It's like people dying. I'm like, well, it's important that we know who actually dies. It's important that we know, okay, the elderly. Well, let's put it this way. Aging increases is a risk factor for every disease. It doesn't matter. The older you get, the higher the risk. But there's that second one. Obesity is a huge risk factor. And nobody is mentioning that a large percentage of the American population is overweight or obese. That's important, but it's not mentioned. Here's what's interesting. You said if you go back, and you're young, so you're not going to remember this. If you go back to the 60s and 70s, actually maybe not even the 70s, they allowed ads for cigarettes. And they were actually pretty.
I looked them up. I remember seeing them in magazines, and then you could find old YouTube videos, and they're making it look all cool and sexy.
Right, yeah, and actually cigarette ads were some of the most creative ads, but it was really more social pressure than anything else that said, you know what, smoking, it kind of sucks, it stinks, okay, it's bad for your health, we already know that, but it was really the stigma of smoking that decreased, I think, the amount of people smoking. I mean, you can't even walk anywhere. If someone's smoking, people are like, oh my God, and here's what's funny, I hate the smell of smoke, but I was one of those few people who was not for banning cigarette smoke in restaurants. I'm like, no, let the restaurant decide. I mean, I'll go to the restaurant without smoke, and if people want to smoke, then go this one. To me, it was a free market issue, but it doesn't matter now because now you can't smoke anywhere.
Well, I'm old enough, though. I actually worked at a restaurant in South Carolina for a summer where they were allowed to smoke in Myrtle Beach at Damon's Oceanfront. We had a smoking session. This would have been 2003.
Oh, wow. That's recent, actually.
Yeah, they would put me, and I was new. I would be back there for hours. Everyone's smoking, eating ribs. It was crazy.
You probably smelled like it. You got home, you're like, holy jeez.
Awful. I was definitely single.
I mean, and so there's a stigma against that. But what's interesting about being overweight or obese, there's a fairly large, and you know this, there's a fairly large social movement, the health at every size, right? The Hayes movement, where they're convincing people based on no science at all, it's purely emotional, that it's okay to be fat, it's okay to accept yourself. And I think what they're doing, they're conflating two issues. One, yes, you should treat overweight people with respect. I mean, being overweight and obese has nothing to do with treating people with respect. You should be kind to people, treat them with respect. Mm-hmm. That's a separate issue. You should do that with every human being. But there's the health issue. And it's clear that if you're overweight or obese, it increases risk for every major disease in the world. And to deny that is like saying the earth is flat and that sumo wrestlers are skinny. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So it's almost like we have to, I hate to say it, but you almost have to put a stigma on being overweight so that people, and it's not that you should be ashamed of being overweight, but you should do something about it if you care about your health. And I don't know, because science isn't convincing anyone. I mean, there's plenty of science on the harmful effects of obesity. So if science doesn't convince it, what will it be? Do we have to go back to a social stigma? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking the rhetorical question, Johnny. Why don't you tell me the answer?
I know. It's so many, the reaction people have, because we all, look, my father died young and weight was an issue. We all have somebody close to us, or we all care about somebody and have love for somebody that struggles. Weight is a tough issue. I tell all my clients who come to me who want to lose weight, and I'm honest. I'm like, look, you've struggled with weight your whole life. You're going to struggle with it your whole life. It's going to be, it's not easy, right? Because it gets interconnected with our psychology. It gets interconnected with these mechanisms that we relate the food to us feeling better, instant gratification. It's very complex, but I think it takes leadership to create a movement or create at least a conversation. We can't even have that conversation.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then you talk about, because I have a bunch of notes from a bunch of my friends wanting me to ask you some questions, but I think those portion controls, you know, do the restaurants have any duty? Do the chefs and people serving the food have any ethical code that they have to succumb to when they serve the public the foods, ingredient? It's really complex. And so I think maybe that's part of the reason a lot of people just feel lost. I think that's what it is. And then we're unwilling. We have this unwillingness to be vulnerable too as a human living in the West. We don't want to say we need help. It's really, really, I don't know where to start with solving that issue, but I think you have to start with yourself.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think that's key. Start with yourself. The issue, like, and I actually hear this argument frequently in terms of childhood obesity. Food companies marketing to parents, right? Yeah, making basically making junk food attractive to kids. You know, hey, get me that. You know, it's basically sugar. You're eating sugar. And here's what's interesting. People always are surprised by my response. I always side on the food companies. Here's why. Because at the end of the day, it's an individual choice. Parents decide what to buy for their kids. Kids aren't buying stuff. I mean, so it's the parents. Same with adults at restaurants. Okay, you go to an American restaurant, they give you way too much food. I mean, and I like large food servings. And in fact, when I went to Tokyo for a conference, this was 3 years ago, I was shocked at how small the servings were. I was with my buddy Darren Willoughby. He's a really large scientist. He's like 260 pounds, and we're going out to dinner. You know, we're excited to get some sushi and sashimi. We order. We can't speak Japanese, so we point. And we're like, yeah, I figured I'm ordering a lot of food. Food comes, and we look at it like, is that all our food? Holy! He's like, I got to order like 5 of these. I mean, it's amazing. The portion servings in Japanese restaurants are actually probably what they should be. They're normal. But to my eyeballs, I'm so used to seeing these gigantic plates. I'm like, wow, that's not much food. But I guess we really don't need all that food. So here, the serving sizes are large. However, it still falls, to me, it's a personal responsibility. And I know people hate to hear this, but it's still ultimately the person sitting down and eating the food. I can't blame the restaurant because they're just serving. It's what the market dictates. The market wants you to serve a 16-ounce porterhouse steak. Okay, well then we'll sell 16-ounce porterhouse steaks, and we'll give you 2,000 calories worth of mashed potatoes and 1,000 calories worth of salad with oil-based dressing. It's what the market dictates. So at the end of the day, all food companies and restaurants are doing are giving you, the consumer, what you, the consumer, is asking for. It's not their fault. It's your fault for accepting it. And I know the personal responsibility message, for some reason, it insults a lot of people. I don't know why. Because it's the same with exercise. It's still a personal responsibility for you to get up and move your body. Maybe you need to pay a trainer to help you do that. Okay, pay a trainer. But don't say it's too expensive and then go home and do nothing. I mean, you have to put some value on your health so that you're willing to spend that extra money to get someone to get you out of bed to move your body, because otherwise you'll do nothing. And if you do nothing, by the time you're 50, 55, and 60, you'll be paying for it with whatever malady or illness you have down the road, and you'll be in the hospital. But yeah, to me, personal responsibility is still number one in my book. And there's sort of a cynical side to that, in that I think if you don't start exercising, and this is just me, observing life and watching people sort of who are younger than me go through this. If you don't start exercising when you're young, it's almost impossible to start when you're an adult and maintain it. That's just me looking at people, because I've had, and you might have this too, I've had relatives, friends, whatever. Every New Year's Eve, they're like, hey, could you send me a diet and exercise program? Because I need to lose weight. I'm like, yeah, you ask this every year. Every year you ask this. And
those are called assholes. ASK. That's what I call them, man. I text my asshole friends. I'm like, dude, don't ask me anymore, man. I've been telling you for 10 years you don't do shit. You just got bigger. Leave me alone.
Right.
Yeah.
But they feel compelled to ask you every year. Like, they realize, holy crap.
Do you think it's that? See, I used to think it was like them thinking that they need to make a change. But now I think, though, the older I get, I'm a bit more cynical. I'm like, don't try. I think they're honey dicking me. They think they're smarter than me. They trying to just create conversation. Like, oh, he's in that space. Let me just act like I need him for a second. And then really, I'm not going to take action. That's how I look at it. Because I know so many people so many close friends that do that shit. Well, I just call them out like, no, you don't. You don't want to. You just don't know what else to talk to me about because we haven't seen each other. The look on their face.
But then 15 years later, they're going to be overweight or obese. I mean,
yeah. See, you brought up now, granted about the physical exercise when you're young and then being difficult to do it as an adult. Now, I was a lifelong athlete, team sports, football, baseball, basketball. I boxed up until 18, college, played one sport. But then after college, I went through that. I think it's a common thing now, a heartbreak when that sport comes to an end. And I didn't, from the time I was 21 to I was 31, I didn't do shit. I worked in nightclubs. I mean, I walked around like an athlete. I mean, I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree, went to grad school, but I was just floating because I didn't know. I was like, oh, I can't play sports anymore. My point isn't that. My point was when I moved to Australia, that's when I first started coaching. It would have been 7 years ago. So I saw the surfers around me. I'm in Sydney, beautiful, similar to South Beach. Every year I visit South Beach. And you guys were actually in Colombia last time I came down. And I want to talk about that too. But for me, it was an aha moment. I was like, damn, everyone's in shape. I'm going to be a product of my environment. I'm going to move down here. I'm going to start working out again. I used to play sports, and then it sucks at first, but you just got to put yourself into it. It's like the philosophy. If you want to be a photographer, spend the money on the goddamn camera and lens first, and then learn how to do it. But so many people are unwilling to kind of fall into the changes they need to make or the person they want to become, and they just never do anything. It's always like the excuse component. So I don't agree with you on that. I think even if you haven't played sports, if you've never been, I don't think it's ever too late. It's just people have to be willing to sacrifice.
But don't you think your prior experience as an athlete, in a way, gives not a head start, but
for sure.
I always say you know, and this is what I see this a lot in South Florida. There's a lot of people who never competed in anything that don't know the pain of competing. Like they don't know. I think
how to lose. They don't know how to win. They don't know how to lose.
Yeah, they don't know. They don't know what hard exercise is. They're like, if there's sweating. Well, this is hard. I'm sweating. Well, no, actually, you're not really doing much. I mean, so the idea, and particularly in the endurance sports, the idea of sort of embracing the pain of exercise is really a foreign concept to a lot of people. They're like, wow, is it supposed to hurt this much? Well, it depends what your goal is. If your goal is to race and be faster, well, yeah, it's going to hurt. In fact, it's going to hurt a lot. If your goal is just to walk your dog 3 times a week, okay, that won't hurt. But with exercise, you get what you put into it. Walking 3 times a week, good for general health. It's not going to change the way you look, but it's good for general health. And then you'll probably feel a little better. Your mood will be better, but don't expect to lose weight on it. So the idea that you get what you put into it, for a lot of people, it's like, holy crap, I really got to exercise that much and eat that well? Well, yeah, you kind of do.
and that's the thing. And that person has no idea what it really feels like to feel good either. And that's where like the empathetic side of me as a friend and coach and son and brother and boyfriend comes into play, because I know 100% what it feels like to be healthy, well, feeling at my best, being productive without any chemical assistance, just discipline and habits. And I know at one time I wasn't that person. I know what it felt like when I wanted to be this person, and I know the effort it takes. But people I care about who will live their lives, and I think it's simple. If we had to write down what the recipe is to feel better, it's not a complex equation. Now, the action of doing it is difficult, but
Yes.
the knowledge of it is simple. I mean, ask a 5-year-old, they'll, oh, just do that and that. It's simple. But so people are so unwilling to do that to not feel good. It frustrates me.
Yeah, you're right. In fact, people conflate, because you're right, it's simple. It actually is simple. But I say just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. And there's a bit of work you got to put into it. And people are like, well, God, if it's that simple, it should be that easy. When in fact, no, it's simple, but it's hard. And a lot of people have a hard time putting, it's kind of putting their hands around that concept. And it's interesting, like here, and it's probably the same in Australia because the weather you're in North Australia?
I'm on the East Coast. So Sydney sits topographically similar to where, because the country, imagine the States, kind of where maybe Atlanta would sit.
Okay. So
so it's south. It's nice.
The weather there is temperate. It doesn't get super cold there.
No.
Yeah. So like in South Florida, I mean, there's people outside exercising all the time. And what's interesting is you go to a local road race, like a triathlon. I'm always shocked how many, and this is how important diet is. I'm always shocked how many overweight people do triathlons.
Are there?
Yes. I'm shocked. I'm like,
that's new to me.
I'm like, first of all, you got to exercise a lot just to finish a triathlon. I mean, you got to run, bike, swim. The swimming, you can carry extra fat. The cycling, you can carry extra fat. The running, you cannot carry extra fat. So what a lot of these overweight triathletes do is they basically die on the run, but they know on the swim and on the bike, it's okay because body weight is supported.
Okay,
but
what's the run? What's the distance on the run?
Like it ranges anywhere from 5K to 10K. Okay. So you can trudge through it. It'll hurt. The swim is usually fairly short. I mean, fat floats, so it's not so bad to have extra fat swimming. And then cycling, your body weight is supported. But it's always surprising. I'm like, I've seen guys who, if you remove their belly, they look like lean people. Face is lean, chest is lean, legs are lean, and then they got like a basketball stuck here. There's like a basketball. I'm like, I don't know what kind of fat deposition that is, but that's just really weird.
Is that cirrhosis? Like I've always been taught, like the liver is swollen from alcoholism, but
it's just weird. I don't know what it is, and it could be partly that, but the fact that some of these male triathletes have this truncal obesity or truncal weightedness is just really weird. But it shows that, and I tell people this all the time, it's very easy to overeat what you think you've expended with exercise. And unless you're like an ultra distant cyclist where let's say you're on your bike 4 to 6 hours a day, it's kind of hard to eat a full meal while you're riding a bike for 4 to 6 hours. But outside of these sort of unusual sports, it is so easy to eat more than you expend. It is so easy. And people like, I went and lifted for an hour or 90 minutes. I'm like, even if you lift hard for 60 minutes or 90 minutes, you're not expending that much.
You're not burning a lot of, you're not. No. People don't realize that. It's, what's your eating habits like? Do you practice a discipline, like window of when you eat? Do you eat breakfast? And what's the last meal that you eat before you go to bed?
I usually work out. Well, I always train in the morning because I just like getting up in the morning. I see the sunrise. It's beautiful. So I work out in the morning. I usually have about 30 to 40 grams of a protein shake after I train. Then I eat lunch, then I eat dinner. So I literally have 3 meals a day. I've figured this out after probably 10 years that if I eat more than that, I actually gain weight. I found that I gain weight a lot easier as I get older. I'm like, holy shit, I can put on fat pretty easily. So protein shake, eat lunch, eat dinner. Usually my dinner is more than my lunch, and my meals are pretty bland. Well, not bland, they're pretty much the same. It's usually rice with meat and a vegetable. I mean, that's sort of what I eat. What's ironic is on days I don't train, I eat everything. I eat fried eggs, bacon, pancakes. I just eat. Eat.
See, that's the thing. People don't realize, like, I love food too. And I have to be very disciplined. My father was 6'4". When he passed, he was over 300 pounds. I'm only 5'11". Yeah, I'm 5'11". I walk around at about 185. And I like being at 180, but it's tough to stay there. I don't eat breakfast. This is the last few, like, I'll eat dinner at 7 p.m. and then I won't, like, it's 9 a.m. now. I've been up since 4:45. I've trained, I've coached. I won't eat until 1 p.m. And I do this every single day, but that's what works for me.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because like with dinner, I don't like eating past 6 p.m., 7 p.m. at the latest, because
that's my latest.
I don't
7.
feel good if I eat a late dinner. Like if I go to a conference and like, hey, let's get drinks and dinner, I'm like, I don't want to eat at 9 p.m. I just don't. I feel like shit if I do, so.
Here's another thing that's controversial that my friends always they're like, John, you're weird. I know I'm a bit of a weirdo when it comes to food, but I tell them, I'm like, food, this is going to sound weird. Maybe you can help me articulate it better. I'd say food isn't that important. And they're like, what are you talking about? You'll die if you don't eat. I'm like, I'm not saying don't eat, but I'm saying it's not that important in how we psychologically gift wrap it into thinking that we've been told since we're born, we have to eat breakfast. We have to eat X amount of meals a day. We have to have all these things on our plate. Where I'm realizing is it's not, I'm a high performer. I don't eat a lot at all. You'd be shocked with how little I eat. And I know that everybody's different. I am super disciplined on my water intake, my rest, recovery, and what I eat, high nutrient dense foods. But when I say food's not that important, I think that from a psychological perspective, the way we view it, I think, is a little twisted as a culture. And I think that's another issue a lot of people have.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, well, one, if you're recovering, then you're eating enough. If you're not recovering, then clearly you're not eating enough. A lot of it is goal dependent. Like if you were training to climb Mount Everest, which to me, people ask, well, what do you think the most extreme sport is? And some people say, well, fighting is. And some will say, riding a bull or bronco riding. I'm like, no, climbing Mount Everest is because people die. That's about as extreme as it gets. So if you're training to climb Mount Everest, which is super high energy expenditure, super crazy extreme environment where you're shivering just to stay warm, energy expenditure is so high that your food intake has to be high, and you have to teach yourself to consume a lot of calories just to survive, because the alternative is you might die. So you got to, it clearly is goal dependent. And for you, it's worked so that you're eating enough to recover. And at the end of the day, if you're recovering, then that's what matters. It allows you to exercise the next day. For people in the endurance sports, obviously food intake is more important because they need more total energy intake than people in the strength power sports, because energy expenditure is just not that high enough for it to even matter. But yeah, there's different, I would say, all roads lead to Rome. There are multiple ways to get to the same place. And that, there's a lot of people who obsess over food. I mean, they eat breakfast and now they're saying, what am I eating for lunch? And they eat lunch. And
that's what I mean. Yeah.
There's, and I don't know if it's an American obsession or a people obsession, but there are people obsessed with it here.
Yeah. I mean, that in itself is another issue, because it's almost like that's our thing that we have. It's like, if I don't have other things, at least I have this thing. Yeah. And I think it's all related to how we seek out fulfillment and how we phrase what being happy is. Because so many people, when they're eating and overeating and reaching to that comfort food, in that moment, they're quote unquote happy. But right when the plate's done, they're unhappy. And that's what I tell people. If you're one of these people, then you need to make a change, because that's not a healthy relationship with anything. Right. And you talked about one of your posts, and this is where I'm going to ask you to play a couples therapist, because I need help with my girlfriend, Chrissy. I love her to death. And I'm struggling to get her to find she's very intelligent, very successful corporate woman. But she won't eat steak. She won't eat filet. She claims it's the texture thing. So like she'll eat lamb, which is gamier than filet, which is crazy to me.
Oh, yeah.
And then she'll eat meatballs, which is a lower grade beef than a filet. And it's almost like you did a post. It was almost like you were speaking to me. And the post said, beef isn't good for visual cognitive performance for women. So with that in mind, with your goal of being able to kind of educate whoever's watching this, specifically Chrissy, maybe talk about some of the benefits, politics aside, but the benefits of what we need as a human functional high-level performer of what we're getting from the beef?
Yeah, well, one easy thing to remember with beef is I remember the acronym ZIP. Zinc, you get a lot of zinc, iron, and protein from beef. So that's one really good thing. Two, obviously, it's high quality protein. And three, that study, when I found that, it was just one of those. I do random searches of stuff. I don't even know what I was referencing when I found beef and cognition. Maybe I typed in beef and like, who types in beef and cognition? Maybe I did, and I didn't even know it. I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, I think people undervalue most of the data. Let's put it this way: most of the data in terms of protein being helpful is in milk protein, so whey protein, casein. Not much is done on beef, probably because the cost of literally giving people beef, which God, that's got to be a huge cost. But I think in terms of the quality you get from beef, particularly if you don't eat a lot of red meat and you don't supplement, the iron particularly for women, I think is important that you get red meat. And obviously beef is, for her name's Christy. Yeah.
Yeah. Christina.
Yeah, Christina, I think the iron portion, the heme iron that you find in beef is easily absorbable. You get some of it from vegetables, but it's not absorbed very well. So you got to consume beef. And the fact that it helps cognition, visuospatial cognition, is really rather novel. I mean, I guess if she, the best argument is if she engaged in a sport which required that kind of visuospatial awareness. Is she a race car driver by chance?
No, I'm teaching her how to box though.
Oh, hey, actually,
she's an accountant.
Right. Well, being able to slip a punch, I mean, we're talking milliseconds. You either get clocked or the glove barely hits you. That is a skill that it's entirely possible that beef could be helpful. But there's a lot of other things that could help her brain. I mean, creatine could help her brain. Low dose caffeine. You don't even have to do high dose, but caffeine could. Choline could. Actually, eggs, the yolk in eggs, because it's high levels of choline, also good for the brain. So there are multiple avenues for her to get what she needs. It's just weird that she likes lamb, but she doesn't like beef, because I like lamb too, but yeah, lamb is, if anything, most people would choose beef over lamb. I mean, right?
I think it's a texture thing with her. And then also with your research and your body of work, have you ever come across any studies or any advice you could have for her and then all my clients and any women out here listening to this and watching this regarding training through their menstrual cycle and then maybe adjusting their nutrition? Is there anything out there while they're on their period to perform or maybe reduce pain or anything like that?
None that I've seen specific to that. If anything, what seems to work best is that just to reduce the pain, exercise alone seems to help. So not exercising would be the worst thing. So that would be one. Other than that, I mean, most women resort to pharmacology. I mean, just to deal with if it's that painful. But exercise alone seems to be one of the few things that might alleviate the pain. And also just sort of, if you're in that much pain, your mood is probably not so good, but maybe if you exercise, up here, your mood will be a lot better. So, but yeah, other than that, there's nothing dietarily really.
A lot of, I've heard from women that pain, they've been told by their doctors to not work out.
Whoa, really?
From their physician said, don't work out during your cycle. And so I wasn't sure what to say because I wasn't a doctor. What would you say to that?
That doesn't even make sense. And here's why. If you take high-end athletes that actually they compete in the sport for a living. Imagine if they took 25% of the year off from their menstrual cycle, they wouldn't be very good athletes. Training through that time of the menstrual cycle is critical. And I think it's gonna decrease at least your perception of pain, I would guess. I mean, the problem with doing those kinds of studies is that you'll find that, at least from experience, women deal with it in much different ways. I mean, some just they grin and bear it. Some will take a lot of aspirin or ibuprofen. Some will just exercise through it. So it's kind of difficult because each has figured out a way to deal with it. Like, let's say you get 50 women and you want to do a study. The challenge you can run, and all 50 have already figured out how they deal with that pain. Like, some will say, well, I'll do nothing. Others will say, I'll exercise more. So now you're going to randomize them into a group. And let's say they get into a group where they're like, okay, I've already tried this. It's not going to work for me, but for the sake of science, you want me to do this? So it's kind of tricky. It's one of those things where that's why you don't see studies on this per se. It's almost clinical observation that seems to work best, or personal observation where women have to sort of self-experiment. And, I liken it to elimination diets. Like, let's say you feel weird when you eat food, so you just eliminate one food, see if that's the food that does it. Is it bread? Is it fish? Whatever. Just figure out what you need to eliminate. And then if you eliminate that food, you feel better. It's like, okay, well, it must be that food that makes me feel weird. So that's how I would treat it with this kind of pain.
But you wouldn't write off exercise as being a cure for avoiding it during the cycle.
Oh God, if anything, I would encourage exercise.
That's right.
By far, yeah.
Jose, do you have any events coming up with the ISSN? And if so, maybe what's the next one? Maybe share with us what we can expect.
Yeah, we have in the end of February, I believe, February, we have a online webinar. We have a series of, I think, 10 speakers actually over over a 6-hour period. In fact, we got really a great lineup here. Let me pull it up real quick because it's really pretty cool.
If you could send me the link, I could put it in the show notes, and then I'll
okay,
so people could kind of check it out. But I want to hear about it.
Okay. Yeah, we have, I think, let's see, here's just some of the topics: time restricted feeding, pre-sleep feeding, the role of sleep in performance, ketogenic diets, also the role of the gut microbiota in obesity, intermittent fasting, beta alanine, citrulline supplementation, and also the latest science on body composition. So all this will be covered in a 6-hour time span. And this is what I've found is that these brief 30-minute talks seem to work best. People have the attention spans for it versus these 1-hour talks, which tend to be quite long. So we have many, many different speakers, all scientists who are published, giving talks in their particular expertise. So that would be February 13th. Also, hopefully, if you can come to the USA, June 17 and 19, St. Petersburg, Florida. It is 18th annual ISSN conference. It's beautiful in the Gulf Coast of Florida.
Jose, we were going to come down this year before it was. Trust me, we were planning to come down. We were down there. We were in South Florida earlier in the year, but it was on our calendar, and then COVID happened. And I'm glad you're doing it again around that same weekend because, it'll definitely be in my calendar. If we're allowed to leave, I'll definitely do it, and I'll definitely keep you posted. Corey posted, Chris and the boys. But I'll put the link in the show notes. I'll put your links in the show notes. This is fun, man. Let's not wait 3 years to do this again.
I didn't realize it was that long. Holy jeez, that's crazy.
Time flies. Time flies, man.
No, this has been fun. Actually, you know what I liked about conversation? It wasn't. And not that I'm not criticizing other podcasts per se, but it's not the laundry list of here's the 5 questions. What do you think of protein? What do you think?
No way, dude.
I'm like, okay, well, I'll guess I'll give you the answer.
I think just through experience. I mean, I've been doing it. I was one of the first ones in Australia. So 2015. I've done over 500 of these with 2 different shows. And I like talking. I like, and man, anybody who invites you on their show and they don't know about your personality, they haven't done their due diligence. So if I'd be holding you back if I were just reading off of a list.
Hey, if you do happen to make it to St. Petersburg, Florida in June, you ought to record. I think it'd be a great idea to record a podcast on the beach.
For sure. I have a film team because we're recording. I recorded a documentary. It's currently. I just submitted it to all the major film festivals. So I have now the point is I have people around me that when we go, I'll have like a team with me. So that's the plan. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that would be great because you got the backdrop and people are out running around acting crazy. So
yeah, I would be
up for that.
I know you would be, man. I last time you guys had your event, I get all these picture messages from Corey and Algieri drinking beers, and I'm like, man, I need to get there. I want to get to Medellin too, man. Colombia looks amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So I think time's flown. Like I said, I'll put the upcoming links in the show notes. This will come out in the next week or so, and I'll send you the link.
Awesome.
All right,
Well, this
Jose.
has been
Thanks
fun.
Yeah, thanks again, man. Don't be a stranger.
All right. Thanks, Johnny. Appreciate it.
See ya.
All right.
Yep, yes, sir.
Bye-bye.